So tonight we're very honored and grateful to welcome back to the ashram Asha Nayaswami. We'd like to give Asha Nayaswami a very warm welcome. As this is the second time Asha Nayaswami is joining us here at the ashram. She came for the first time last year, and we're very grateful that she is able to join us again this year. And we'd like to introduce Asha Nayaswami, who in 1969, when she was 22, Asha met Swami Kriyananda, a direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda. Recognition was instantaneous. From that day to the present, Asha has dedicated herself to learning and practicing the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda as Swami Kriyananda taught them. Asha Nayaswami is the founding member of two Ananda spiritual communities, the first Ananda village located in a rural area, and the second Ananda Palo Alto in Silicon Valley in California, where she has resided for the last 36 years. Asha Nayaswami is Ananda's global ambassador, sharing the Guru's teaching all over the world. And she is the author of 4 books and has an extensive presence online. And Asha Nayaswami is here to lead a program titled Essential Attitudes for Success on the Spiritual Path. And tonight is the first night will be teachings on the subject of courage. So let us give a very big hand to Asha Nayaswami.
There you go. Okay, now I'll say it again. This is my second visit to this wonderful place with my friends and feels like home. This is the nature of a sadhu. Wherever you are is home. But especially when you're with brothers and sisters who have such a wonderful heart for the spiritual life. It just couldn't be better. Life doesn't get better than this. To find truth seekers and friends wherever you go. And so for the next few days, we're going to be talking about some of the things that we need to have in order for our spiritual life to unfold in the way that we wish. Swamiji was kind enough to say a little of my history. I'm a devotee of Paramhansa Yogananda, and my direct lineage is Swami Kriyananda, who had the great privilege of meeting Swami Shivananda when he was a young man in India. Shivananda was not young, but Kriyananda was. And I have spent my whole life on the spiritual path. Before I discovered these teachings, I was an intense truth seeker with no optimism about ever finding anything. And then I found Swami Kriyananda. I was only 22. And he had a community that was starting up in the hills in California, and I went there and I never looked back. And I never wanted to look back. And among other things that I'll talk about in the next few days is how to align yourself in such a way that the part of you that quails at the quest finds strength to persevere. Swami Kriyananda was a very talented musician, and he wrote many, many songs, putting the spirit of the spiritual path into that. And I never travel without a good musician. So my friend, please come here. This is my friend Ambara. We had the good fortune to meet some 40 years ago. And even though we don't live in the same community now, he's kind enough to get on an airplane whenever I ask. So he'll share some music with you.
What's not to like about the Bahamas, after all? Some men call it progress, down with those who doubt. To join the causes others join, and shout when others shout. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Some men lack the daring ever to be free. They shun the heights and crowd the depths and court security. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Cowards see but pride in singularity. Oh, never mind if men are wrong, so long as they agree. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Claim the power within you, error to defy. The world may change or disappear, but truth can never die. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Thank you. Dare to be different, dare to be free, dare to roam far like wind on the sea. Fly like a gull, soar high on the air, be strong in your courage when others despair. Never in anger, never in haste, go without pride, be never abased. Freedom is yours if freedom you give. To all give it freely, in freedom you live. Mountains that stand up tall to the sky tell us no dreaming is ever too high. Dare to climb boldly, brave that high peak. You'll never know failure if bravely you seek. Dare to be different, dare to be free, dare to roam far like wind on the sea. Fly like a gull, soar high on the air, be strong in your courage when others despair. Be strong in your courage when others despair. Thank you.
Ashram, we sing a lot to Shiva, which is quite natural, Shivananda being the guiding spirit of everything that happens here. And of course, Shiva is the great renunciate. and he's the great dissolver of delusion. And part of why we sing to him is because we are affirming within ourselves that that's who we're going to be too. I mean, the genius of all the images and the deities is just pulling out these different aspects of the spiritual path and personifying them in truth. This is not imagination, this is truth, where the different qualities of the infinite take these particular forms, and when we attune ourselves with those particular forms, then the power of it begins to come into us. And so any ashram that is dedicated to Shiva is really an ashram that is dedicated to truth. Last night we had the brilliant, and this morning also, the brilliant presentation by that lovely woman, Swami, who was just my great privilege that I had the opportunity to hear her. And she took a very Vedantic approach to the spiritual life. Those of you who were here, this is the Jnana way. Neti, 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 not this, not this, not this, not this, not this, not this. And meanwhile, part of us is extremely enthusiastic about that. We're very eager, our souls are extremely eager to escape from the mire of the insecurity, the vulnerability of this world, to find some place where we have strength and where we have comfort and where we have power. But of course, we also live simultaneously on many different levels. So even as she was so compellingly telling us that this world is just a dream, and she was kind enough, God bless her for being so, to also pat us on the head and say, I know this is hard. Yeah, honey, this is hard. I agree with you. This is really hard. And this is what we're caught with, all of us. Part of us, our superconscious self, our higher self, our wiser self, was born for freedom. We were born for God realization. Everything else is just Swami Kriyananda and I, we used to call it petty enthusiasms. Just things that you're interested in, like, like marriage and your children and your grandchildren, just all the things that we have to do to pass the time that are really the exercise equipment for our souls. They're important in themselves. They're profoundly important in themselves. I was caught in a situation in my life, just to make it clear, when I say Swamiji, I'm referring to Kriyananda. When I call him Master or Yogananda, I'm referring to Paramhansa Yogananda. Many of you know Yogananda from his autobiography of a yogi, which was one of the really founding books in 1946, just bringing this whole wave of teachers and teachings from India, of which this is a very fruitful tree. Vishnu Devananda ji and all of the disciples of Shivananda, all of these masters work together. They're like waves of the sea. It takes lots of waves to finally bring the tide all the way in, and that's what we're working with. So I had, because I met Swami Kriyananda very early in the development of our communities, and things were small, and for the first 16 years I lived next door to him, essentially, and often worked for him. So what I'm telling you is what I learned from him. Basically, everything I know I learned from him. Many of you understand that. My words are, I would have been dead in a ditch if I hadn't met him, but he pulled me out of all of that. So where I was saying was I was in this situation in my life at one point. It was actually very interesting because it may be relevant to some of you. Many of us have some scars, impressions from past lives that guide us, that influence us, often more than we know. We just feel like this is me and this is how I respond. And in the Western world, where most of us, many of us, were born into, not all of us, but I grew up in a very Western way. I'm in a lot of countries. I realize I'm with a lot of Americans, so I can say I grew up in Texas, and you know what I'm talking about. So I grew up in Texas in very unimaginative circumstances. My parents were highly educated, an intellectual, Jewish intellectual family, for those of you who would understand what that is. But it was completely conventional within that framework. And I had this passion for truth and this intuitive understanding that it was there. One of my very earliest memories was with my mother and my brother. I don't think my sister was born yet. My brother was older. He was a terrible tease. Terrible tease. All you younger sisters know what I'm talking about. You're nodding. Some of you are nodding. And we were in the back seat of the car, and he was doing something annoying, which created a kerfuffle. And my father was driving. My mother turns around and scolded us like this. Unfairly, she scolded me. I was about 2, maybe 3. It was very unfair. It was all his fault. But I got my feelings really hurt. Isn't that what happens to us? I mean, just we're going along and then something happens to spoil the feeling. But this is what I remember, strangely, at this stage of my life, my childhood before I met Swami Kriyananda, just kind of a few strong moments like this. This is one of them. I recall I got down on the floor of the car. In those days, you didn't have seatbelts, and there was this big hump. I don't know what the mechanics of that were. And I put my head down on the hump, and I started listening. I actually started listening to the Om, is what I was listening to. I was listening to the sound of those tires on the highway like that. And I can still feel it. It went right through me. And I remember thinking, I need to go to that place in myself where everything is just wonderful. Whatever has happened here is just on the outside. I have a place inside of me that I can contact, listening to the Om, where everything is always different. And I just remember sort of going back to that place and then coming out, perfectly cheerful, which of course can only be from past lives. How do we know those things otherwise? We're not a blank slate when we're born. But we carry into our lives all the impressions of our previous incarnations. And, the history of Western spirituality includes a lot of monasticism of a somewhat repressive sort. And also the traditions of India. It's all about renouncing. It's all about giving everything up. And what Yogananda came to teach was a little different from that, in the sense that we have ashram communities, but they include married couples and families with children, and it's the idea that one can live for God with wholehearted dedication, and just bring the spiritual into the mundane, rather than renouncing the mundane in order to find the spiritual. Everybody has their own way of doing this, but this is the real message of Shiva, which is the renunciate life, which I happen to embrace the renunciate life. It speaks to me powerfully. But even that life has to be understood in an expansive, not a narrow way. And for me, in the very early years of my ashram life, the way our community was set up, we were all extremely poor, and we lived very primitively. This was way back in the 70s. We were all hippies back to the land. It didn't really matter. And I worked for Swamiji. He gave me $50 a month out of his wallet. He opened his wallet and he would hand me $50. Kept all my money in this opaque jar. I never really looked to see how much was in there, because if I didn't look, there was always something in there. That was sort of how it worked for me. Later, as I got more sophisticated, I carried that jar for a while until someone persuaded me that I could get a bank account, which was a really novel idea for me. These are all these samskars from who knows where, who knows what. But then circumstances required that I participate in building a small house, because we lived on land where there was nothing and we had to put buildings on it. And of course, if you're trying to make a house, you want to make it nice, except it absolutely terrified me that if I had a house, and if it had, for example, electricity, or even worse, indoor plumbing, I'm telling you, we lived really primitively, okay? That would mean I wasn't spiritual anymore. Because I could be sure that I was spiritual if I had nothing. And of course, this is just, you can be You can be a king in a castle and be a self-realized master. And you can be impoverished and be more attached to the little hut you have than the richest man in the world. It's not what you're doing on the outside, it's the courage you have inside to look at life as it really is, to see yourself as you really are. So my solution was that I would build an ugly house. If I do it badly, that will prove that I'm still a spiritual person. So the people who were helping with the building of the house finally said, if you're not going to help, just get out of the way, which brought me to my senses about it. And when I talked to Swami Kriyananda, because this was not a small dilemma for me at all, he said, you do not get out of karma by doing it badly. It's like, I'll show you how detached I am, is I'll just make a mess of this, right? And that'll show that I don't really care. Weirdly, you see this striving for excellence is also part of the story. The striving for excellence really has to do with ourselves. It has to do with the gunas, the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic energy. Tamasic energy is downward pulling. Rajasic energy just moves around without really going anywhere. And sattvic energy lifts our consciousness. And that's what the real battle is. That's why they speak of the Guru as Triguna Rahitam, the master of the three gunas, no longer compelled by outward energy, capable of choosing one's states of consciousness. And that's what I want to talk about in these next few days. What attitudes, what way of approaching life really gives us the power to choose our own consciousness. Think about that. What do we always experience? It amazes me. I think I have some scars for being mentally unbalanced. I would like to think I'm not now. You can ask the people who travel with me what they think, but I think I'm not. But everybody teeters in one direction or another. Our samskars are those impressions. They're vrittis in the chakras, whirlpools of energy. And they tend to draw us back to what we already know. You could simply call it subconsciousness. We're comfortable with what we already know. Even if what we know is not satisfactory, we have a preference for the known misery over the possibility of what might happen if I change. And to me, there's this reality. It still surprises me now in the last few years. Sometimes I'm moving around a great deal. When I wake up in the morning, sometimes when I'm on a traveling cycle, I have to say, where am I? Which side of the bed do I get out of? Where is the furniture? Because otherwise, unfortunate things can happen like that. But no matter how far I go, no matter where I am, how exotic it might be seemingly in your mind, the thing is that I'm always there. Have you noticed that? Wherever you go, you take yourself with you. The same story, same name, same basic reality. You recognize your own hands. You know who you are. This inescapability of our own consciousness is really what drives us to seek more, isn't it? When I say the mental balance, I can't think about that too much, because it can make me very uneasy. If I do, I understand how we have sometimes a choice, between shutting out this reality altogether or looking right at it and adopting the attitude of Shiva. What is happening here? What is really happening here? So when we start on the spiritual journey, wherever you are in that circle, we tend to think of it as linear. Everybody starts here, everybody finishes here, and we're kind of moving in one big clump like the Boston Marathon, Those who are ahead, those who are behind. It isn't at all like that. We're all scattered out on away from our own center, on all different parts of the wheel. And we're all heading into our own greater reality. And so if you're at the south from center, you go north. If you're at the north from center, you go south. People can go opposite directions just depending on what it is that they're trying to understand. But what we're all trying to understand is Sanatana Dharma, which is the true word for all of that is represented here, which is not really Hinduism or Christianity, the world that I'm part of. We include Jesus very strongly, not church teachings, but the original teachings of Jesus. In fact, Yogananda's stated purpose in coming to the West was to teach the original teachings of Jesus and the original teachings of Krishna, and to show that they are one in Sanatana Dharma. Some people define that as eternal religion, Sanatana Dharma, which is true. But the phrase I like better is that which is. You see, that's what the whole spiritual path is about. We are living in that which appears to be true, and this was what the lovely Swami was telling us last night. We're living in what appears to be true. But Adi Shankaracharya, the verses she was giving us, he told us what is really true, which is very different. But we're so accustomed to defining good as ease and pleasure and matching what I have for my little story about what's going to be best for me, that even though one part of us is inspired to seek this totally other way of thinking, another part of it can't even imagine. And this is where the simple word courage is. Swami Kriyananda said quite simply, the first necessary quality on the spiritual path is courage. Not even devotion or experiences or expanded consciousness. It's just having the nerve, just the sheer nerve and imagination to think that maybe what's going on around me is not the whole story. Maybe there's something completely else. And then once that thought even begins to enter our mind, just time after time after time, and the courage, the primary courage that's really required is to know thyself. Who am I really? It's a lifelong process, that's a fact. We sort of get a little bit of a picture of it, and then we have more experiences. And the question always is, what do I do when some new challenge comes to me? How do I try to resolve it? What are the doorways to freedom? And what it comes down to is very simply this. Years ago, back in the early 70s, when I was living in this very impoverished rural community, now it's quite a lovely place, very highly developed with beautiful homes and so on. And then we lived in teepees and trailers and little huts that we could stick together. And most of us were in our 20s with no family, no responsibility, nobody cared. And we once had a very important conversation with Swami Kriyananda. The phrase, the sexual revolution, was a big rallying cry of my generation at that time. And so somebody challenged Swami Kriyananda, what do you think about the sexual revolution? Big, we're so proud of ourselves. Anyway, Swami said, overall I think it's a good thing, which is hardly the answer we expected. But his response after that, he said, because you are making your own experience the measure of your values. And he said, and that's much better than just taking everybody else's word for it, provided. Swamiji was often like that. He would say something, and then he would just put a little something on at the end. And if you only heard the first part and not the rest of it, you missed the point. But he was saying, provided that you are honest about your experience. And that honesty, that ability to really look at things as they are and not flinch when they contradict our precious little preferences. And even to just begin to understand what this world is about. Usually the first or second question whenever I ever start talking about karma, about the law of cause and effect, which goes from lifetime to lifetime, which defines everything that happens to us. Everything that happens to us is the cause and effect working itself out. Karma is what we don't yet understand about Sanatana Dharma, about that which is. When we have an idea that this is true, we need a whole set of experiences to teach us a higher and a deeper level of reality. Not in a negative sense, But it's not merely what disappoints us which teaches us. In fact, Swamiji put it that way. We learn something from having our desires thwarted, but we learn much more from having them fulfilled, which is sort of an odd thought at first, but then he explains it very simply. If you want something and it is denied to you, but you still want it, a piece of you will always be thinking, I would be happier if I had that. And then even when the divine calls us, even when we have uplifted experiences, we have a little vritti in one of our chakras, and that vritti is a whirlpool of energy, and it says, yes, this is nice, but if only I had this too. Oh, I love being in the ashram, but only if I had a romantic partner who would come with me. Or if only my partner would come with me instead of staying home. And yes, I love, you can hear it. You know, Yogananda went so far as to say every unfulfilled desire eventually has to be fulfilled. Swami Kriyananda in horror said to him, he said, well, if I was 7 years old and I wanted an ice cream cone, and I didn't get it, does that mean I still have to have it? And Yogananda said, yes, like that. Oh my God, okay? I've had to think this one through. And I don't have any scriptural authority on this, but I'm just going to give you my common sense on it. You know, we are nothing but vibration. And we think that the divine energy, that God's loving presence, comes to us intermittently. Isn't that so? Every so often we have a strong feeling that God was present. You know, every time that I've been here and we come out of that meditation and that wonderful chanting begins, you can just feel the Holy Spirit just come into the room. And all of these voices, something very magnificent is happening there. But it isn't as if that power was absent until we started chanting. I mean, where would it be if it wasn't here? You know, there's no time and space, there's no geography. It doesn't wait in the dining room and then come in when the chanting starts, you know, or be in some Himalayan cave and then, oh, they're starting and everybody comes, it comes rushing over. If a master is sitting in this room and he looks at this room, he sees something entirely different than the rest of us see. Because his consciousness, his sense of things is different. But it's vibrations of consciousness. That's one way to think about it. And we're always vibrating at whatever level of reality we're capable of perceiving. That's the vrittis in the chakras. That's all of our unfulfilled desires, all of our joys and resentments and longings that are still there to be resolved one way or another. So the tone of perfect bliss is right there, but we're singing a little like this. My friend Dambaro, who sings perfectly on key, he comes because I don't. I can sing a little, and if I'm in a choir and there's somebody really good next to me, I can match their tone and I can sing. And I can tell when my tone is off. Leave me by myself. Well, don't. That's all. Don't leave me by myself. But the point is, what we're trying to do, all of spiritual practice, is not that we actually lift ourselves, it's that we align ourselves with the vibration which is always there. It is we who go in and out of attunement with it. It is not that the divine or the guru or the angelic beings or the deities or Shiva himself withholds his grace. It's that we're singing the wrong note, and they're trying to align us with that note, but we keep singing the note that we have. And the note that we have is I want, I don't want, I wish, I would be happier if. And the whole process of spiritual life is to realize that I have. It's here, it's with me. So when we long for something and define our happiness by getting that, then that piece of us is always singing that melody. And so when the Om tries to absorb us, we almost go into it. 3/4 of us goes into it. Maybe even for a few seconds, our whole self goes into it, but the other's busy singing this other note, which is close, but not quite. And so what we have to do is we have to recognize, and this is where fulfillment comes. you have what you're longing for. And in this world, much of it is really beautiful. There are awful things on this planet, but there's also a great deal that is beautiful. Just go out into the beautiful sea out here. You can see it. Look at the wonderful faces. Sit in the front row and hear all that chanting sweeping over you. It's heavenly. It truly is. But we still long for more. You see? And that's what we're trying to understand. We're trying to understand that everything we seek will come to us through divine attunement and through no other way. And divine attunement does not necessarily mean that all our desires will be thwarted. It means only that we have to understand what it is that's giving us joy. Where does the love come from? You know, where does happiness come from? And here's the interesting thing, you see. We're always experiencing it inside ourselves, aren't we? It may be catalyzed by something that happens. Your first child is born, and suddenly we discover the extraordinary bliss of absolutely selfless love. A friend of mine was well established on the path before his first of two sons was born. And he said after the first baby was born, he said, I always thought I was a pretty selfless guy. He said, but now that I'm a father, I realize I didn't even begin to know. He said, because nothing in my life matters now. All that matters is my son. He said, I would give up my life without a second thought for the sake of my son. That's true love, we find out. Where does that power come from? It doesn't come from, I want this, I don't want this. It comes from attunement with that divine force. And once we start on this path, the soul will not rest. The jiva is determined. The drop of water will make it to the ocean. And our job is to have the courage to just take it one step at a time. And not constantly be thinking, oh, but maybe I could. This is what I want. I asked Swamiji once about reincarnation. I actually asked him a different question, but I got a very interesting answer. My fear has been that, with all due respect to those of you who are in your 20s and 30s, that when I'm in my 20s and 30s again, assuming I have another body, I'll be as stupid as I was when I did it then. You know, I highly recommend getting older. Just because, highly recommended. Because you can just look back and you just have a little bit better perspective. So I've still, and Swami did not comfort me on this. I just like, you know, am I going to forget everything? I want to be an old woman from the time I'm born. I want everyone to say she was never a child, she was always an old woman, that's all. Meaning that I could hold. Is this truly realization, or is it just that I've been through enough that I remember? I pray it's realization. We shall see. You know, I shall see at least. But in that context, I asked him about reincarnation. He said, what causes us to reincarnate, he said, is longing and regret. Whatever we still long to have and whatever we regret and want to go back and fix. He said, those are the ties that bind. Those are the samskars. Those are the vrittis in the chakras. And when we're passing out of this world, leaving our body, you know, instead of going up into the light, those vrittis grab us and pull us down. It's just very simple. So the most important thing is to pay attention. To pay attention and to do our best. Do I still long for it? Why do I think it would make me happy? Now, don't misunderstand me. You know, the things that we long for, the karma that we're compelled to carry out, is the necessary exercise for us to learn it. You do not get out of karma by doing it badly, by just repudiating it and pretending, oh, I'm fine, I don't really want that. The single most courageous act of the truth seeker is to really want the truth, just to know who we are. I've made up for myself lots of little mantras that help me when I'm confronted with a reality in my own nature that is way beyond me to overcome at this point. I just very calmly and happily say, I'm just not that good. That's all. I know all the teaching. I can spin it out for hours. But that doesn't mean that I know it inside myself. So we just stand where we are without embarrassment, without shame, and just ask the Divine, however you understand it. Divine Mother, help me. Divine Mother, bless me. Show me what I don't know, and give me the courage to learn it. That's what it's all about. How deeply do we long for truth? How deeply do we long for truth? And to then stand and say, this is who I am before my conscience and God. This is what my understanding is. The ashram cat. Hello, ashram cat. You know, it's very good karma for animals to be with humans, of course. We have this sentimental attachment to animals staying in the wild, but in the wild, all they have to do is, you know, they're afraid and they're hungry all the time, and they're never in the company of higher vibrations. So it's a good thing for the cat to be in higher vibrations, and it's a good thing for us to be in higher vibrations, isn't it? You know, we've all come up from many, 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 many levels of misunderstanding. And when we find ourselves, even for a moment, in the presence of divine light, drink that in with every atom of your being and pray forever that Divine Mother will take you by the hand and lead you home. Would you please give us a song before we end? Okay.
Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone. Follow your dream, though it lead to worlds unknown. Life's but a shadow once our dreams have flown. What if men cry, your dream is not our own? Your soul knows the answer. Go on alone. Give life your heart. Bless everything that's grown. Fear not the loving. All this world's your own. Make rich the soil, but once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Go on alone. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you.
So I'd like to thank very much Asha Nayaswami for this beautiful teaching tonight. Let's give her another big hand. And also for the beautiful singing. Sorry, I don't remember the name. Dambar. So I'd like to give Dambar a very big hand for beautiful singing. And we look forward for the continuation of the program, which will continue tomorrow with a midday workshop and then also in the evening satsang. So now we'll go over the schedule for tomorrow. Tomorrow morning we'll have the morning satsang here at 6 a.m. And tomorrow, as part of the morning satsang, we'll be presenting a short and very inspiring film called In the Name of Peace. And this is a film showing a little bit about the life of Swami Vishnudevananda and specifically presenting about his very special peace missions that Swamiji was doing. So a film that gives a